I have now been reselling for 2.5 years. Oh my gosh, that time has really flown by. And I've been getting a lot of messages from people who are brand new to reselling or thinking about starting their reselling business really soon. So I thought I would make this video on 6 things that I wish I knew before I started reselling.
Won't nobody love you the way they should. Won't nobody check up on you, make sure you're good. Won't nobody check those body tremors for your neck.
Hi everyone, my name is Becky Park and I am a part-time reseller on Poshmark, eBay, Mercari, Citizen. I think that's it. I think that rolls out the whole list. So in this video, I wanted to share with you, even from just like a part-time seller's perspective, things that I wish I knew before I started reselling. A lot of you probably know my story as far as how I got into it, but I just had a bunch of clothes laying around that I wasn't wearing anymore. Same with my husband, same with my kids. We just had a lot of stuff that we had accumulated over the years. And I was trying to find a profitable way to get rid of that stuff. And so I remember simply searching on Google, can I sell my clothes online? Or where can I sell my clothes online? Because I was so done with Plato's Closet because of how little they were wanting to give me for my clothes. And I stumbled across Poshmark. So selling on Poshmark was my first experience. And when I started, just like posting stuff, I am one of those people, I have a very addictive personality and I also want to do things 100% if I'm going to do it. So I remember trying to research what's the best way to list things? How can I make more sales? And that's where I fell down the rabbit hole of all this free YouTube content regarding how to make sales in Poshmark, as well as blogs, as well as Instagram. And so that's when I started really taking reselling seriously. And I've gone from just selling, here and there on Poshmark, listing, a few things every week, to what I'm doing right now, which is selling on 4 different platforms. I have 2 students of mine because I am a choir teacher. That's what I do for my full-time work. I have 2 students of mine who help me out with things like photographing and sharing my closet. So it's like a little business almost. And we've grown so much in the past 2.5 years. But even with that, I have been reflecting a lot on what things do I wish I knew when I started. So I'm going to share 6 of those ideas with you. And I'd love to hear too from you if you have anything, especially if you are a more seasoned reseller than even myself. What are things that you wish you knew at the beginning? Or even if you've just started, what are things that you wish people had told you? Please leave those in the comments below because I'd love to hear from you. Also, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you're brand new. If you are brand new, hi, thank you for checking out my channel and I hope you enjoy this video. So the first thing that I wish I knew before starting my reselling business was to be thoughtful of branding. I think that when you are first just signing up for Poshmark or for eBay or something like that, you typically just type in your name or you just type in some random letters and numbers and that becomes your Poshmark closet name. You don't really put a lot of thought into it because you just want to get started. You just want to list your stuff. You just want to make all the money. But I wish that I had been more thoughtful of branding. I actually don't mind the fact that I started with my name. My name is Becky Park and that is the name of my Poshmark closet. And I've actually carried that into my eBay store, my Mercari store, as well as Citizen. I just use the name Becky Park and I actually am okay with it. The one thing that I'm not okay with is on Instagram and on YouTube, I'm Becky Park on Poshmark, which actually does have a nice ring to it. And at the time, I was only selling on Poshmark and I was convinced that I would never stray to another platform. But I wish that I had actually just signed up on Instagram and YouTube as Becky Park because I feel like by being called Becky Park on Poshmark, I've kind of pigeonholed myself a little bit. And I'm sure there are people out there who, if I'm spewing any sort of eBay advice or, anything about anything else, people are like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's Becky Park on Poshmark. She's only allowed to talk about Poshmark. So when you're thinking about what to name your closet on Poshmark, for example, I think it is important to be thoughtful of what to call it because not only is that the name of your Poshmark closet, it's also something that you're going to carry with you when you think about things like creating thank you cards or business cards or an Instagram. If you can keep everything the same and consistent, then it makes it easier for people to find you from one platform to the next. Also, just strictly talking about Poshmark, if your closet name is something like 124CND, I don't know if that's anyone's real Poshmark closet, but let's say that that's yours. Let's say I actually liked something from your closet and I was trying to find it later. I'm not going to find it. Like, your name was crazy. Like, it was just a series of random letters and numbers. So there's no way that I'm going to find it again. So even for the sake of just people remembering your closet and remembering, hey, I liked her closet, there were some things in there that I was actually interested in purchasing, it would be easier for them to find your closet if it was something that stood out to them. The second thing I wish I knew before starting my reselling business is to create systems for things like inventory and bookkeeping, and to put them into place as soon as possible. When I first started reselling, I had piles and piles of clothes that I was going to resell, and I just had them like in all different places of the house. I don't know why. So like the first place I had them, I remember, was like in the office, and I would just like have them in piles against the wall, and I would have them as tall as they could be before they toppled over. And if they toppled over, I was like, I guess I need a new pile. So I would just have these crazy piles, and I ran out of wall space in the office, so I moved into my daughter's room, and she was like 2 at the time, so she didn't care, but I had just, again, piles of clothes in her room. And every time I made a sale, I would rejoice for a second because I was like, yay, I made a sale. And then I would have like a panic attack because I was like, oh my gosh, like I have to find this item now amongst all these piles, because the piles, of course, were not organized. And even if they were, it's like they're piles. It gets hard to find stuff that way. I now have a much more organized system for inventory with bins and numbers and a spreadsheet. And I will actually link my inventory video right here. So now when I sell something, it's so easy to find the item to ship it out. I wish I had started something like that in the beginning, because I would have saved myself a lot of headache. The same thing with bookkeeping. Okay, this is something that I still don't really have like an amazing system in place for, and that's because I've gone so long without one. So I would definitely say from day one, start keeping track of everything. Keep track of where you're going thrifting and the mileage it costs you to get there and back. Track how much you're spending on inventory. Track even if it's inventory from your own home, because if it's something that you actually owned for yourself and got use out of and then you sold it, you actually don't have to pay tax on that item. So even tracking like what was yours personally versus what was something that you picked up at a thrift store. You also want to track anything that you're buying for your business. Maybe you're buying compostable mailers or tissue paper, or maybe you have a subscription to cross-listing softwares like List Perfectly. All of those things are tax deductible, so you want to make sure that you have a system in place for tracking those things so that when it comes time to file your taxes, you're not scrambling, you're not trying to pull up your credit card history to see like what payments you made. You just have it all in one area. Again, this is an area of my reselling business where I still have a lot of work to do. And I think part of the reason why I'm in the position that I'm in right now is because I didn't have a good system from the get-go. The next thing I would say is start slow and purposefully. Now, this is easier said than done, especially for someone like me, because again, like I said at the beginning of the video, when I'm excited about something, I am go, go, go. And my husband, thankfully, is really good at being like, whoa, like calm down. Let's think about this. Like, don't just spend all this money. Are you sure it's going to sell? Because I have so many things that I bought at thrift stores at the beginning of my reselling journey that were complete and utter junk that I still have in my Poshmark closet 2.5 years later. So don't just buy stuff for the sake of buying and fill your house with crap that no one actually wants and that no one is actually going to pay money for, but make sure that you are being purposeful in everything that you're doing. Do your research and learn what brands sell before you buy a bunch of stuff. Make sure that you have a place to put all of your inventory before you order a pallet of clothes, for example. You want to make sure that you've got systems in place and that you're growing slowly where you're able to keep track of what's going on and you're able to handle everything so that you don't become overwhelmed and start hating reselling before you've even really begun. The next thing I wish I had thought of before I started reselling was to create a workspace that I love. Again, I still don't really have this, and a lot of that is because I didn't know that my reselling business was going to grow into what it has. But I feel like the work that I do for my reselling business would be so much more enjoyable if I was able to do it in a space that I love. So carve out a space in your house, even if you don't have an office or something, just one like corner of a room that is yours, that you can decorate or that you can, set up in a way that is going to be functional and aesthetically pleasing for you. It makes such a difference rather than, sharing a desk with your child who gets like marker all over everything and you're constantly picking up fake food and throwing it back to their section. Make sure that it's a space that you can call your own and that you love and that you can get a lot of work done at, because otherwise, again, it kind of creates a sense of like anxiousness. Is that a word? Anxiousness? Anxiety. That's what I'm trying to say. Anxiety. And it can be really overwhelming if you're trying to do work in an untidy space that you just don't really want to be in. So I would say create like an oasis in your house where you can do your work and you can do it well. The next thing that I wish I knew before going into reselling is that other people's advice about reselling is just that, advice. It is not hard, cold truth. You don't have to do what everyone else is saying that you need to do in order to be successful. And that's one of the beautiful perks of running your own business, of owning your own business. It's that you get to do things the way that you want. I think I was so overwhelmed when I first, started watching YouTube videos about reselling, and when I joined the Instagram reselling community. It was wonderful because there were so many people being so generous with their knowledge, but it was also so overwhelming because there were so many different views and perspectives, a lot of which would conflict with one another. And I was just like, which one is right? And I know that this is kind of ironic given the fact that a lot of the types of videos that I put out into the world are like tips and tricks and things you should do and things you should stop doing if you want to make money on Poshmark. So I know it comes across as ironic, but that's what I'm saying. Like, even for you, the listener, anything that comes out of my mouth, it is simply advice. It's simply advice based off of what has worked for me. And you should never take it as gospel truth and say like, oh, this is going to work for me too because it worked for Becky. That's not necessarily the case. You have to trust your gut and you have to do your own research once you've taken in a lot of the information that people are willing to share, and you have to decide for yourself, what path am I going to take when it comes to my reselling business? What choices am I going to make on a daily basis for the sake of my business? These are things that you have to decide for yourself, and you don't have to do things the way that I do or the way that the next person does. And that's the beauty, again, of running your own business. The last thing that I wish I knew, and something that I'm still working on, is that your beginning is not going to look like somebody else's middle or their end. I still struggle with this. I still struggle with, looking at Instagram and YouTube and seeing these pictures of people's ginormous package stacks and feeling inadequate because I'm like, how come I'm not there yet? Like, what am I doing wrong? What's happening? What's wrong with me? And, you just kind of spiral. Remember, especially if you're just starting out, your beginning is not going to look like somebody else's middle or end. Even for me, it's pointless for me to compare my 2.5-year-long journey to someone else who may be, in the same exact spot as me. Like, maybe they've also been reselling for 2.5 years, but it's still pointless for me to compare myself to them because our life situations are not the same. Maybe the person that I'm comparing myself to is part of a team, like they are a husband-wife team who resell together and that's their full-time job. They should be making much more money than someone like me, who I do this by myself and it's all part-time because I have a full-time job as a high school choir teacher and I have 2 kids. So it makes no sense for me to compare my reselling business to that of this reselling couple with no children and all the time in the world to resell, right? So like off the top of my head, I'm thinking about Rally Roots. There's no reason for me to compare myself to them. The numbers should be drastically different because they're able to put in so much more time and energy into the reselling business than I am. So even though like conceptually, I understand that I should not be comparing myself to people like Rally Roots, it is something that's still really hard to do. So take whatever measures you need to kind of safeguard your mind and your heart from feeling inadequate or feeling like you're just not doing enough or you're just not, good enough. That's simply not the case. You can't compare yourself to the people around you because 1, you probably haven't been doing it for as long as some of the people that you're comparing yourself to. And 2, even if they've been doing it for just as long as you, or maybe you've been doing it for longer than them, it still isn't the same because the context of your lives are so different. And that's something that I wish people would have been more open about or just talked more about on Instagram and YouTube. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've been talking about it so much lately, is just because I want to make sure that people don't get down on themselves because they're not doing as well as the people around them. Just do the best that you can, because that's all that you can do, and focus your energy on what you need to do to improve versus spending that energy paying attention to what everyone else around you is doing and accomplishing. Who cares? Focus on yourself, focus on your own business and on your own growth. So those are the 6 things, guys. Those are the 6 things that I wish I knew before I started my reselling journey. I'd love to hear if you have any other things that you think people need to know before they start reselling, or even just things for people who maybe have been reselling for a little bit and just need those gentle reminders of like, make sure you're thinking about these things. If you got anything out of this video, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that like button. If you're new to my channel, I'd love it if you could subscribe and hit that bell notification so that you're notified every time I put out new content like this. And that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.